start with a quick flashback to what a Wednesday afternoon was like in January of last year. Super specific, but if you want, you can close your eyes and think about what you were doing then. Maybe you were studying for a test, hanging out with friends, or in school. I'd like to share what my Wednesday afternoon was like in January 2021. I went to my room to lie down, and the following Tuesday, I was still there. I was paralyzed by how miserable I was feeling. I did not go to school, I did not shower, I barely ate, and I slept all day. I felt hopeless. A year and a half later, after various medications and hours of therapy, I still struggle with similar issues. It has impacted my academics, my social life, and my overall motivation. Well, okay, that was super serious and depressing. See what I did there? Depressing? Depression. What does that even mean? To many, it's used to describe a person. If you have someone to describe me, they'll usually say, oh yeah, she's the one who's depressed, and then stop there. And hey, I am depressed, but why does that have to be a bad thing? Why do people have to ignore everything else about me? Like, yeah, I'm depressed, and? If there's one thing I want you to get out of my talk today, is that depression is not a character flaw. It is not a definition of a person, nor a negation of everything else that they are. We need to rethink how depression and mental illness is represented in society. I want you to understand both that there is a stigma attached to mental illness and how it affects teens today. It is important to note that everything I mention here today is based off my own personal experiences and the research I have conducted. By no means is this an attempt to invalidate any of that, any of anyone's personal experiences. The statistics are staggering. Over 280 million people worldwide suffer from depression, yet only 30% of the teens who are diagnosed are being treated. In Spain alone, 1 out of every 10 people from the age of 15 suffers from at least one mental illness, most commonly depression or anxiety. For the first couple of weeks following my diagnosis, I was left in the dark. No one had told me I was depressed, and in my mind, there was no explanation for my suffering. It just was. Although diagnoses can be controversial, and that's a topic for a different time, when I was finally told, everything made sense. I now realize that depression isn't something that I can control, and that what I have is a real medical diagnosis, not something that I'd done to myself or the result of me not trying hard enough. It took me a year and a half and a conversation with my dad to figure out why I wasn't told about my diagnosis, and there are 2 main reasons. First, my parents and former therapist did not want depression to become my identity. Depression is something that I have, not something that I am. Believing otherwise could make me believe that there's something inherently wrong with me and foster a deeper sense of hopelessness. Second, they understood that there is a stigma attached to mental illness, and being exposed to that could potentially impair my situation. So here clearly lies a problem. But first, what is stigma? Stigma is defined as a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. Stigma is a very broad topic. There's a lot that can be discussed. However, what is most relevant to our conversation today is that there are 3 main types of stigma: public stigma, self-stigma, and institutional stigma. Today, I will only focus on the first 2. Public stigma refers to a set of negative acts or beliefs that lead others to fear, reject, and discriminate against people who live with mental illness. Self-stigma is essentially a badge of shame that you place on yourself. This is rooted from what society deems as the norm, causing one to feel like an outcast. If society does not accept mental illness as a concept, one may feel as if they don't belong. I've brought up this topic many times before. I have spoken to people of all ages about the stigma surrounding mental illness. I wanted to educate the people in my community about it and bring to light an issue I've encountered from within. However, the response I got was, well, I see your point, but that doesn't happen anymore. Yes, it does. Of course, as a society, we have improved tremendously on how we approach mental illness, yet there still continues to be implicit and explicit messages to the contrary that stigma still exists, such as misrepresentations in the media or isolating behavior. The effects of stigmas can be very damaging. For example, still to this day, many people make negative remarks and assumptions about me, stating that I use my depression to get out of things I don't want to do, such as go to class or hang out with friends. The truth is, I mentally and physically can't do these things due to the mental block and emotional strain they have on me. Hearing these things made me feel very unsupported by my friends because I chose not to empathize with what I'm going through and just assume I'm being lazy. Stuff like this can make you feel very alone and isolated, as if you are the only one in the world suffering and you have to go through it alone. Besides isolation, various types of stigmas can have powerful negative effects on someone. Stigmas can create stereotypes such as people with depression are unreliable, unstable, or even dangerous. People use their mental illness to get out of things they don't want to do, or everyone gets sad, stop being so dramatic, and many more. Sometimes, precisely because of the stigmas, someone may refuse to seek treatment. People feel embarrassed about seeking professional help because of how negatively mental illness is portrayed in the media and in society. They censor their need for help because they're afraid of being treated differently. Therefore, their self-esteem decreases whilst there is a deeper sense of hopelessness. A result of both public and self-stigma is worsened psychiatric symptoms, according to a recent study. And if these things weren't bad enough, some people suffer even more due to harassment or bullying because of the negative stereotypes. There are countless ways that stigmas are pervasive amongst teens, but what I want to focus on now is how we can do better. First, we need to talk openly, making it less of a taboo subject. This would normalize mental illness and promote the need for treatment. When I was first diagnosed with depression, mental illness was not talked about, and I felt like I had to hide my feelings just to seem normal. If we promote open, honest communication, countless teens worldwide will not only feel better about themselves, but also be safer and happier in their communities. Education is always the first step to any positive change. Through education, people will begin to understand the issue, its symptoms, and causes, promoting empathy. Further, this will result in us being more mindful of the language we use instead of tossing out random diagnoses like, oh my God, she's so bipolar, for the sake of snark and sarcasm. We also need to be conscious of what we portray in the media as relates to mental illness. Mental illness is often represented through violent and unstable characters, usually the villain or the first to be blamed. This is not only a one-dimensional characterization, it is also mostly untrue. Therefore, we should stop putting people in these boxes. And finally, as a society in general, we need to be more compassionate. With depression, for example, it is not something that is readily visible, and since we can have no idea what someone is going through, we need to lead with kindness and empathy. Thank you.